Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. We're coming up on 1 year of this podcast, and I want to thank you all for your faithfulness to this resource. As a way of celebrating the anniversary, in March, we're going to revisit the topic of my very first podcast, which was how to talk to your teen son about sex. You should check it out. It was hugely successful. But on this episode in March, we're going to modify this topic to include some realities that every dad should be aware of and educated about. So in 3 weeks, I'm going to broadcast an interview I'm having with Pastor Casey Coates of Sea Life Church in Rockwall, Texas. This is our home church, and Casey is the teaching pastor. Casey has worked with, taught, and counseled young people and their parents for a couple of decades. His wife, Lauren, owns a counseling practice here. I've asked him to come on the podcast and discuss with me how dads can speak to their kids about, dating and sex. We're going to talk about kids of all ages and what they need from their fathers on these important subjects, what to say, what not to say, and how to say it. It's going to be an awesome and inspiring podcast, and it's going to be our 1 year anniversary, so don't miss it. Today, we're stepping into a topic every dad faces. No matter if you've got a toddler, a 10-year-old, or a teenager, we're talking about discipline. And this is going to be a big overview. It's going to feel like kind of a fire hose hitting you with lots of water. But I want you to hold on, maybe even take notes. And then as you go into episodes of discipline, you can be sure and understand these to practice these essential traits in the moment of discipline. Man, we don't like to discipline, do we? It's tough. It takes intention and energy. We know it's going to make our children feel bad, so we don't like that. I mean, if you love to discipline your child, you might want to talk to a counselor about that. Even though we don't love to do it, we do it because we love. But we need to make sure we understand the right motivations, the proper methods, and the desired outcomes that we want. That's because few aspects of parenting have been more misunderstood and more misapplied than that of discipline. And unfortunately, the damage often shows up on both ends of the spectrum. On one side, there are dads who discipline from anger, frustration, or intimidation. The correction becomes reactive, harsh, and inconsistent. That's not loving. It's fear-based control. On the other side, some dads have simply stepped back. They've surrendered their leadership. Discipline is absent, and their children are left without boundaries or the safety that loving correction brings. But as father friends, being a dad isn't about giving our kids what's comfortable for us. It's about loving them courageously enough to give them what they need. So again, discipline is a big topic, and one episode could never cover it all. So that's why I created a research-backed, scripture-based resource called Brave Boundaries. You can find it under the Resources tab at fatherfriend.net. It walks through the heart behind discipline, your goals, what methods work, and even addresses the whole question of spanking. But for today, I want you to pause and reflect as we begin. Ask yourself this question: where do I tend to land on that spectrum that Mike just described? In other words, do you find yourself erupting when you feel disrespected and disobeyed? Or do you avoid confrontation altogether, hoping things will just work themselves out? Today, I'm going to challenge you to grow, to manage yourself first, and to rise above what feels comfortable so you can give your kids what they truly need. We're going to walk through 6 principles for loving, effective discipline. Now, again, these apply across every age and every stage, so no matter how old your child is, you can and should implement these principles. Let's dive in. Principle number 1, connection. At its core, discipline isn't primarily about punishment. You've got to understand that. It's about connection. This principle applies in 2 ways. First, discipline actually strengthens your emotional connection with your child. When done well, when it's measured, loving, and intentional, it actually deepens the bond between you and your child. So your goal is to be more connected after discipline than before. and not distant. Now, that might sound counterintuitive. You might think, if I discipline my children, they will come to resent me. No, that's not true. Properly motivated and measured discipline creates deeper connection and deeper relationship with your child, as would be the case without it. In those moments when you're correcting with calm and clarity, you're proving that you care too much to let them drift. Over time, they come to love you more deeply, not because you let things slide, but because you leaned in. Some of my most cherished experiences as a father have come after moments of discipline when I've held, comforted, talked with, and truly listened to my children. Dr. Ross Greene said, "It's in the connection, not the correction, that we find the power to shape behavior." And that's really true. So the bottom line, discipline done right doesn't push your kids away. In time, it pulls them closer. Second way to apply this principle of connection is this. You as a dad are making essential connections for your child to realities of life. Through discipline, you're teaching them to connect things like cause to effect, choice to consequences, respect to authority, behavior to outcome. You're helping them form internal categories that are really important in life, like responsibility, respect, integrity, and self-control. These connections are critical for your children, and you've been assigned the God-given role of helping them make them. And one way you do that is through loving discipline. Okay, the principle of connection. Next, the principle of communication. This concept alone deserves a whole book, but let me hit 3 critical angles here. How am I to communicate in the episode of discipline? Here's how you communicate. First of all, remain calm. Kids can push buttons. They will push buttons. In those moments, it's easy to erupt. But if we want to raise kids who know how to handle their emotions, we've got to model it first. It's okay to feel angry. It's even okay to say, "I'm angry about what you did." What's not okay is letting that anger drive your actions with yelling, intimidation, labeling, judging them. Those are reactions, not leadership. If we can't control our emotional outburst, how can we expect our children to do any better? Now, I'm not talking about just simply raising your voice. Raising your voice to communicate seriously to your child, I think, is okay. But yelling and intimidating is just out of the question. So take a breath, step out of the situation, count to 10 or count to 100, do whatever it takes to center yourself, then come back and parent from a place of calm. Remember, you are the thermostat in the family, not the thermometer. You set the emotional temperature of your home, and your emotional habits will form your child's emotional memory. So be calm. Second way to communicate in an episode of discipline is to get curious. Be curious about what's going on with your child. Stephen Covey said, "Seek first to understand, then be understood." Man, that's great advice. That's not just great leadership. It's essential for discipline. Reactions are impulsive, driven by emotion. Responses, however, are thoughtful, grounded in understanding and motivated by love. That's why curiosity is vital. Understand what's going on inside your child and behind the misbehavior. And once everything is calm, don't start with lectures. Start with listening. Ask, why did you do that? What were you feeling? What did you need in that moment? This teaches them to transform emotions into words rather than behaving their emotions. We're teaching them to recognize and name emotions, really important, to turn them into words, identify what they need, and learn to meet that need in healthy ways rather than through disobedient ways. Discipline isn't about intimidating your child into submission. It's about helping them make the connection between their behavior and their emotion. Third thing in the realm of communication is to commit to clarity. Think about how it feels when your wife has unspoken expectations and then gets frustrated when you don't meet them, or when your boss expects you to just figure it out. That vague pressure leaves you confused, second-guessing yourself. Now, apply that to your kids. When a father holds unspoken expectations and then disciplines the child for not meeting them, it creates that same kind of confusion. Paul warned fathers twice in the New Testament not to embitter or exasperate their children. Those are found in Colossians 3:21 and Ephesians 6:4. And one of the quickest ways to embitter your child is through unmeetable or unspoken expectations. So communicate your expectations clearly and, when possible, in advance. Make sure your child understands what's going on, that there are no surprises. And when you discipline, explain then, communicate then both the reason and the consequence of the discipline. By communicating well, you are connecting for them cause to effect. Okay, principle number 3 of discipline, choices. One way we crush our child's spirit is by removing their choices. When children have options, their dignity is preserved. They're employing logic and reason, and they're more capable of accepting consequences. Now, under this category, there are 3 types of choices. Again, big picture, but I'm going to touch on each one of those. Number 1, either-or choices. These allow you to maintain control while giving your child a sense of control over themselves. So for a young child, you might say, you can either stop yelling or take a time out. That's a choice. For a teen, you can say you can either come home by 10 p.m. like we agreed, or you'll lose driving privileges for the weekend. An either-or choice. You're not threatening, you're setting a boundary, and then you're giving them the dignity of a decision. If they choose to continue the misbehavior, they have chosen the consequence for themselves. Number 2, when-then choices. These motivate positive behavior, but let's understand the difference between when-then choices and bribery. A bribe would say this: if you pick up your toys, I'll give you candy. A when-then choice would say this: when you pick up your toys, you may have a treat. This assumes the child will do what's expected. It's non-negotiable. It's not a way of bribing them. It's expected that they will obey you, and if they do, then they can have this privilege. And when they do, they can enjoy something afterward. Choice number 3, you decide choices. Some things are important, other things are not. For us, a healthy lunch was important, but the exact items in the lunch, not so much. While choosing for your child can be a time saver, it's really good to allow as many choices as possible for your children to have within boundaries. I like to call it drawing the box for your children, establishing non-negotiable boundaries, but within that box, permitting choices. So make the box big enough for several good choices, but not so big that there are no limitations. In this principle, you are connecting choices to earning trust. Every time they make the right choice, they are earning trust with you. And as your child grows, you expand that box over time. But when they're younger, remember, parent decides, the box remains smaller, even though there are some choices that you give your children. Okay, principle number 4 about discipline, consequences. Here's a hard truth. When the pain of a decision is worse than the pleasure of that decision, behavior changes. Now that's true for us too, not just our kids. Let me say it again. When the pain of a decision is worse than the pleasure of that decision, behavior changes. Now there are 3 mistakes parents make in the realm of consequences. Mistake number 1, they do not act. I'll never forget watching a mom on a playground spend 15 minutes giving warnings to her daughter, counting to 3 multiple times, threatening to leave. Well, eventually my son and I just left, but Macy was still there on the playground playing. When parents allow children to go unchallenged with disrespect or disobedience, it only emboldens them. Never-ending warnings, incessant yelling, tons of emotion do less than fair, in-the-moment, non-emotional consequences. Talk less, have less emotion, let your actions and your consequences speak. Mistake number 2, it's similar to mistake number 1, but mistake number 2 is this: parents do not follow through. You lose integrity when you state consequences and don't follow through. You've conditioned them to believe you're not a person of your word. It's worse to speak consequences and not do them than to not speak them at all. Then here's mistake number 3. When the consequence doesn't match the offense. Be sure to match the severity of the offense with the severity of the consequence. If you overpunish a minor offense, you're not illustrating justice. If you underpunish a significant offense, and the consequence then has little effect. So here's the key. When possible, let natural consequences do their work. When I was a teenager, I used to help my dad on construction sites. The first time I went, I was trying to cut a 2x4 with a handsaw, and I was pushing really hard, trying to saw it with every stroke, just pressure and pushing it hard. Well, if you've ever done that, if you've ever used a handsaw, you know that the teeth of the saw will always catch and stop when you're pushing it like that. It's a struggle. Well, my dad told me, Mike, let the saw do the work. And that made sense. Rather than forcing it, the natural motion of the saw would cut the wood. He was right. It's about letting the tool move with its natural motion, not brute force. So in the same way, let natural consequences do the work of discipline. It's much better for a child to connect their choice to a consequence than for you to do it for them. Here's an example. When my oldest son was 17, he was staying up till 1 or 2 a.m. on Friday nights playing video games and then just sleeping really late on Saturday mornings. It wasn't good for him. It was something that could have formed a habit and addiction around gaming, and it just wasn't best for him. So instead of commanding him to go to bed by midnight, I said, listen, you can choose to stay up late like you're doing, but you have to get up by 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings. No sleeping till noon. If you don't get up on your own, you'll be grounded. Well, guess what? He soon learned that staying up late wasn't worth it. The natural consequence did its work. So here, under this category, you're connecting choices to consequences. And that's an important connection to make. Remember, discipline is also about rewards for positive behavior, not just negative rewards for negative behavior. So connect positive choices to positive consequences as well. Now, let me share with you a note on spanking, because that has to do with consequences, right? In the bonus section of Brave Boundaries, that ebook that I told you about, I've written a whole segment on spanking. I'm not advocating it. I'm only looking to explain it. I share with you research and the logic and the scriptural basis regarding spanking, making sure that you understand what it's really all about. So if you're interested in that, be sure and get the ebook on fatherfriend.net to understand more. The 5th principle of discipline is the principle of consistency. And this is similar to consequences, but the principle of consistency. In one sense, that mom on the playground was consistently poor at follow-through. Her daughter learned, my mom can be counted on to not do what she says. Dr. James Dobson stated, it is the ultimate paradox of childhood that youngsters want to be led, but insist that their parents earn the right to lead them. Wow, that's true. In discipline, consistency earns integrity and trust. When you discipline for an offense one time but not the next, it creates fear, doubt, and insecurity. That inconsistency sends a negative message about your character. In contrast, consistent boundaries established by reliable parents provide safety and security for children. Here's the key connection. You're connecting consistency to your character. In other words, your kids are learning that you are a person of integrity when you have consistency, that you have the character to be consistent. It's really important. And here's the 6th and final principle of discipline. That's the principle of compassion. Conveying genuine love creates the very foundation for everything in fatherhood, including effective discipline. Without this heartfelt motivation, everything else crumbles. So vital, so important. When you love someone, you sometimes must do difficult things. Properly motivated discipline is born of love, and properly applied discipline is a loving act. The key question a father friend should ask is, out of love for my children, what do they need? And then have the courage to provide it. But how do we communicate love within discipline? Jesus told the story of the prodigal son, a young man who squanders his inheritance and returns home in disgrace. When his father sees him from a distance, he runs to embrace him with open arms, filled with joy, and throws a celebration. That story is found in Luke 15. It's a beautiful story of the compassion of a father and the compassion of God our Father. So in the story, that same father who allowed his son to leave and rebel is the father who received him back with joy and compassion. When you convey unconditional love to your child, discipline takes a whole new meaning. Children are learning what pure love is. Here's what to do. Before the consequences of discipline, reassure them out of your love, because I love you. Say this to them. Because I love you and I want the very best for you, you're grounded for the weekend, or you're getting a timeout, or you're getting a spanking. After the discipline is over, you've enacted the consequence, and those consequences have run their course. Tell your child again, I love you very much, and there's nothing I won't do to prove that to you. If the age and the occurrence is right, if they're crying, if they're upset, hold them, comfort them. Let them see that the same dad who corrects is the dad who also loves and shows compassion. So always assure your child of your love both before and after the act of discipline. Why? Get this. This is important. Because compassion demonstrates that it is the behavior, not the child, that the parent rejects. Here you're connecting discipline to love, hard choices to love. You're teaching your children that when you love someone, you sometimes have to do hard things. Over time, correction without compassion creates resentment in our kids. There's nothing more important in the realm of discipline than this. Earning the right to lead our children is no easy task. It demands effort, energy, courage, focus, intention, and consistency. While it's tempting to take the easier route, consider this. The pain of regret is worse than the discomfort of discipline. By embracing this challenging work, learning it well, doing it well, you lay the groundwork for a peaceful and manageable future with your child. Now that's all for today. I hope you found this helpful. Again, we just scratched the surface and it was a lot. So if you want more information, be sure to check out my ebook called Brave Boundaries. It's a 27-page practical, faith-filled based guide calling fathers to lead with calm authority, not reactive anger. And it includes a bonus section called Before You Spank, a roadmap for dads. This and other resources can be found at fatherfriend.net. Thanks for joining me. Dads, lean in, lead well, and love big.